Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the GameDev.tv community podcast. I'm your host, KB, and this podcast brings you the audio experience of GameDev.tv. Now, let's get right into the podcast.
Yeah, I'm Lee Davis. I'm an animator at Naughty Dog. I've been there since 2009. On the last title, am credited as head of melee animation, and that's kind of been my specialty since The Last of Us 1, so dating back almost 10 years now.
Dang. How does it feel?
How does it feel to have the game out?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one and working for more than 10 years.
Oh, yeah, it's a pretty long tenure, and it's been pretty awesome. I mean, coming up, even when I was in school, for animation, Naughty Dog was known, back in the day as kind of being leaders in that space in game development. So, I think for even today, especially today, any animator that finds himself in that building, working on stuff, it's kind of a dream come true, and is a little surreal. So to that extent, it still is, after all these years. I mean, it still kind of feels that way.
Oh, I bet. I mean, you're working with the big dogs.
Yeah, well, I am a big dog.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go all the way to the beginning. How'd you get started with animation? Was it something you always knew, or you just got into it like during college?
So, when I was a teenager, young teen, the movies like Pixar and stuff was really just starting to, hit the scene. Like I'd seen Toy Story 1 and was pretty blown away. I mean, you go back even, there was this old like VHS series called The Mind's Eye. And then just thinking back to was it like Lawnmower Man and stuff like that. That's kind of where like CG was at when I started thinking about doing it. But, in the 90s as a kid, you didn't have the access to anything like that. It's just total science fiction, And I had I've been an artist to some degree, ever since I was very young. And so I was, I knew that that's kind of where my passions were. And I had I had art teachers in high school that kind of worked with me and pushed me because they, felt like I had talent, and I would enter art contests and stuff. And so I was really focused on the traditional side of things for, up until halfway through college, really. But that was the message back then, because we didn't have any real means to do anything, notable at home. I mean, at-home PCs were, we're kind of just becoming a thing, and whatever we had at home wasn't really that great. They had, the machines, I don't know what, the Alias Wavefront or whatever that was around back then. You had to have, some real resources to be able to do anything CG. So, so the message was always, focus on your traditional skills, and, eventually, we'll be able to teach you this stuff one day, right? So I actually went to a pre-college program when I was 15 in 1995, so that dates me. But, and if you look back at what the sophomore class was doing at Ringling in those days, is kind of laughable to look at now. It's the whole class would collaborate and make this kind of silly little basic geometry animations and stuff. But so I went to that pre-college program. That was where that message was. I mean, here I was at a place that actually had the resources where I could be doing that, and the professors basically said, hey, go back, stick to the drawing board, when you get into college, we'll teach you this stuff. So I stuck with that for the next 3-4 years, and I ended up going to Savannah College of Art and Design. And even then, I really didn't get to, I don't think I touched Maya until I was, at least a sophomore, maybe even late sophomore year, early junior year. I think it's a lot different these days. But and at that time, I knew I was really into 3D animation, but I didn't know. I wasn't determined to be like a specialist in animation at that point. It was really kind of an organic thing over the next couple of years particularly because of a professor I had that was really good and just kind of he made animation exciting because the point with that was you could act out stuff and it was it was a lot of action, and whereas like we all were generalists, any student at that time, if you're going for a computer art degree, your senior project, and you'd do the storyboard, you'd build the characters, you'd rig them, you'd make the sets, you'd do your own textures and lighting, all that stuff. But basically, by the time I had made it to my senior project, I kind of was animation was kind of what I was most interested in, and also felt like what I was becoming like the most skilled at. So I just tried to burn through all the other types of production, and then just focus mostly on like character animation for my senior project, which ultimately would be kind of the foundation for eventually helping me land a gig as an animator in the gaming industry. But it was still wide open. I mean, I couldn't say I was like a professional level character modeler or texture artist or anything at the time, but I had those skills, and I would say they were probably on par with my animation skills. But if you gave me the choice, I would have chose an animation gig. So I guess we could just segue into like how I landed my first gig, because that's really how it all happened. I had a friend in college that got a job at a company called Warthog, no longer around. They were in Austin. And he actually left school early. He was one of these guys that was very focused into video game character art at the time. And just let me know they were looking. He was at this place called Terminal Reality in Dallas, and I had not used 3ds Max by that time, so I had to learn 3ds Max and Character Studio, and then take their animation test. And they loved it, and that's how I got my first gig. And so, I kind of, in a sense, fell into it. I suppose there's any number of things that could have happened to that. If I would have gotten like a character art test, I would have put just as much effort into that, and it'd be a totally different life that I would have lived. But like that's kind of just how that happened.
So if I'm getting it right, you didn't do animation until you got to like college.
Yeah, I mean, I had not done my first walk cycle or anything like that until my preliminary computer art class, which was after like 2 years of all your foundation classes, in art school at that time. Because I'd imagine the curriculum is much different these days, but that's kind of how people did it back then. And if you think back to like in the late '90s, early aughts, the capabilities of video games at that time, like there wasn't really, it was kind of like, I wanted to make movies. I wanted to make, I wanted to do feature films. It's like kind of what every aspiring, computer artist, animator, would gravitate towards at that time. But, and I think that's mostly because, the fidelity of the games, just wasn't, it was kind of like, I mean, it was kind of not really looked down. I mean, it was kind of like second tier, quality animation. Yeah. I mean, we were just transitioned from like sprites to 3D. And so if you wanted to do the best looking, most, kind of impressive type of stuff, you wouldn't necessarily, strive for video games at that time. I mean, from how I remember it and everybody that I knew. And the resources, even through education, I mean, it wasn't really like any kind of like video game focused, at least not at the, it wasn't a university, it was an art school, but I think even in the universities, it's kind of new. So it was very soon after I started professionally that, geez, I think it was like only a year or two later, you had what would have been Xbox 360 and PS3 come out, and then things started, really kind of, took a nut, it stepped up, and there's been quite an evolution in video game animation ever since.
Yeah, you saw that with GTA 4, 'cause GTA Vice City compared to like GTA 4 when the PS3 came out, it's totally different, like ragdoll effects and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even the Hanky stuff, and there's technical reasons, for all that too. I mean, there was limitations. Even between the last console and our current console, there were some limitations, on the real-time rendering side.
Now, what's exciting about your story is that you didn't really like find it when you were young, because we've done a lot of artists, and they'll be like, "Oh no, I was like 7, and I just knew like I wanted to do art." So it's great to know that like you can start later on, like when you're 18, going to school, and then get really good, and then go be an animator. Because a lot of people feel
absolutely.
like it needs to be like a talent thing, or like I needed to know it since I was little. Now, do you think anybody can learn animation no matter what age, or it has to be like in younger years?
I think like most things, if you decide later and it really depends on like kind of what your foundation is. I was a pretty skilled, just traditional artist, at a young age, just drawing, painting, life drawing. I actually had a drawing minor. I even in college, I thought maybe I'd want to be a concept artist. So I spent a lot of time on that type of stuff. I think, it all depends on what where you're coming from. I mean, it would, it would stand to reason that it'd be a little bit more difficult if you like say, have never drawn even a stick figure and you just like decide to, be a professional animator. So, and I had, I had a background, I think, that, supported, getting into that. And of course, like, the interest from a relatively young age, teenager. I think, like I said, it was all down to like what the resources really that people have. I mean, these days, there's stuff like Blender, like, there's nothing stopping you from getting into like high level, professional level animation at a young age. So,
Blender's amazing. The things you can make in there, it's just getting better and better, and it's all free.
Yeah, and if you want to transition from that to a more professional package, I mean, that transition wouldn't be much. Certain that those skills would translate pretty well.
When you were studying animation, was it like all-time thing? Like every day you study for a certain amount of hours? Was it all day, every day? You made sacrifices? Like what was your studying like?
Well, at SCAD, there's requirements in an accredited institution, right? Like, we had art history. I even had, math and other regular history classes. So yes, I mean the percentage of my time in school that I actually spent on animation was less than 50% for sure. It'd be in like the low. I don't know. It might be less than 20% if you looked at the the like 4.5 years I was there. I like I said, I think talking to the younger kids that are coming out of that school, that sounds like the curriculum's a little bit different. There wasn't really much of a concept of being specialized in in these disciplines like character art, environment art, effects and lighting and animation, for instance. Like that, I'm not sure like the even in the art schools really had a grasp of the practical application of that in the industry, and that's because you still had a lot more generalists out there doing things. We're making my first team was maybe 28 people or something like that, which is tiny, and we were doing what was considered to be AAA titles. So you really had to be more of a generalist even professionally. Sure if that answers your question.
No, that makes sense. Now, the thing is, it's like there's a lot of like, what was the most hard moment in your schooling? Like, how did you go from like doing maybe 20% of animation to being like, this is what I can do, no doubts, like I'm gonna go make this happen? Because I've seen a lot, especially GameDev.tv students, where they'll just be like, I don't know how I can get from like okay at animation to like, oh my gosh, I can work at a studio now. There's like a gap that they're missing, and they want to understand how to fill
Right.
that gap. Yeah. So maybe
Yeah,
for
that's
you,
a
like,
good question.
yeah.
I mean, you know, to be brutally honest, I think that
Okay.
when you're at that point, there is a certain amount of faking it till you make it.
Okay.
You know, I probably thought when day one starting my job that
Mm-hmm.
that I was a professional and had the capabilities of like making professional level character animation for video games. Looking back, it was okay, but wouldn't necessarily stand up now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when do you know you've hit that point? I mean, I think it would have. I think a good way to gauge it would just be getting a lot of eyes on your stuff, and the ideal scenario, right, would be that you have a mentor who does
Okay.
have years of experience and is able, they're able to like give you that type of feedback. And even in the absence of that, there's an unlimited amount of like professional animation reels out there, because when you're in order to land a gig as an animator, you got to have a reel, right? And that's
Yeah.
got to show relevant animations to what the studio is looking for, and how it's going to if it's going to be applicable to like with the project and the quality and everything that they're going for, and even down the ideal scenarios, like you've even got the style that they're looking for, and it shows that you've got you've got a grasp of all of the principles of animation. So I think if you take everybody out of it, if I were to like try and think, I'm trying to get in the industry now, I've got this library of animation, this body of work, I would just do kind of an A/B comparison and try and make my stuff look as closely to the B being, people who are out there, shipping titles, how their reel looks. That's what I would do, right? And so and then of course the next step would be to to actually have be in communication with people who are in that position.
Okay. That sounds like good advice. It's interesting because it's like there's a moment where you kind of just have to not look at other people's work and just focus on getting better every day, because then you'll start judging yourself and be like, I'm not good at like the masters, but then it's like you're really like outweighing your skill level. You're right here and you're trying to be one of the best of the best. It's like, no, you have to be better than what you were yesterday. So it's just tough. It's like
yeah, I'm
yeah.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean right, because that's the flip side of that whole equation. I mean, you don't want to constantly compare yourself to others and say, well, I'm not, my stuff. I mean, I could be doing that now. I mean, I could put a reel out and there's going to be, I could look at everything that I've done and what it's not,
Mm-hmm.
and feel like I'm my stuff's not good enough or whatever. I mean, you could definitely get caught into that loop. It's just that, and I guess there's two sides to that coin. I mean, you don't want to like operate in a vacuum, but
Yeah.
all you really can do is improve on your own skills and kind of work from where you're at, and strive to be better. The question you're asking is like is kind of a tough one. I mean, it's like when you have this realization that that you've got what it takes to to make the break, and it's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure that geez, I mean, I'm not sure I knew that until I got hired.
Mhm.
It took me a while. It's not like it all. I kind of I didn't want to give you the hour-long breakdown of that story. I gave you the cliff notes. I mean,
Yeah.
it took me a while. I graduated. The reality is I graduated. I had a cooking job in college. I was making pizzas,
Yeah,
and
you can't go wrong with that.
no, it was fun. No, it's
Yeah.
just people on the East Coast, the South, they would know Mellow Mushroom, great
Hey, where did
gourmet.
you grow up?
I grew up in Vero Beach, Florida.
Really? Oh, wow.
So,
From Florida.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. I don't know if you know where Vero Beach is, but that's my hometown. So SCAD was just up the road there, up 95.
Mm-hmm. You say
Clean, about
SCAD, you
5 hours
mean
drive.
like the
It's
school in
Savannah
Savannah?
College of Art and Design.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have a
in
friend that
Savannah,
goes there.
Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they've got a Mellow Mushroom there and on Bull Street in downtown Savannah. So I had to work part time there. So I had I knew how to do two things. I was okay at animation, CG, art, and I knew how to make pizzas. And I ended up out of in those days, we were still sending our reels out in VHS. I mean, I'd sent out like 70, 80 reel, like you had to dub your reels on VHS and send them out. I sent them all over the world.
That's
I would have
crazy.
gone
Yeah.
anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine that. You having a website, like you could have, I think it was like, there were the studios out here in LA, the Digital Domain, and all the others. They were slow to adapt the kind of what we know now as like the modern means of distribution of your own content. So like the guys there had a VHS. They probably had the CRT TV in their office, and they had VHS, and that's what they wanted. And that's it took them a while, because it's not like 2003. I mean, you could burn CDs, and you could have had a website, and you could have put your stuff online, but like they wouldn't have looked at it that way. It wasn't that they just they're kind of set in their ways.
It wasn't the norm, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even Weta, they were all taking VHS. So I sent out to, it was a spray and pray method. Anyone who was hiring, I was sending everything I had out to them, and it all fell on deaf ears. I mean, I had a couple callbacks. It actually started to look a little dismal. It's tough. Even if you've got good stuff, and you've put everything you had into it while you're in school and putting all your stuff together, it's a tough industry to break into for anybody. But it took me, I don't know, maybe from the time I walked, got my degree, and maybe, I don't know, 10 months to land that first gig. And I was
Those 2
doing.
months, you were working at a pizza job?
Well, actually, it wasn't making. That time, I was back in Florida. I moved. I leave Savannah.
Okay.
I'm basically with my parents, and I was working in this little cafe, and I would have taken the first thing to come along, and it turns out the first thing that came along was great. I mean, it was so fun. And that's really that's why I've done games ever since. I've not ever worked on movies. I've only made games, because as soon as I landed that and got into it, I just knew that's where I belong.
So for those 10 months, was it difficult? Were you like having doubts, or you were just like, I'm just waiting until the right opportunity comes?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, always.
How would you get through that?
I kept going for it. When I finally got the opportunity to take the test, it was like, oh, we want you to take this test. We want you to do it in Character Studio. And at the time, I never, even opened Macs, right? And so I just basically treated it as like a, finals to working on one of my final projects. And I had a week. I think they gave me a week and a half, because I told them I had never used the program before. So I had a crash course in Character Studio. And they gave me these, real simple characters, and with a little bit of direction. It was just it's kind of funny, because really even that is real similar to what what I've even been doing in recent years, which it was like it was basically fight choreography. And it ended up working on this game called Blood Rain 2, which is Rain, the main character. She's like a Dhampir. She had these retractable blades that came out of her arms, and so they had like a real rudimentary version of her and sent it to me, and I made this cool little thing. I think I watched Blade, the movie, and I got some choreography out of that and kind of worked with that and made this little fight sequence. But I just gave it my all. I remember it was late nights. It was like crunching. I mean, it was like crunching, trying to ship the title. It was like for a week and a half, just hammered it and crossed my fingers. But 100% there's doubts. I mean, you got to know when you're getting into it that you're fighting against the odds. That school is it's big. It was big then. I think it's twice as big now. I mean, you've got like 1,000 or so grads every year. So many of them are fighting for the small amount of jobs that you are, and so obviously it's very competitive. And I think to some degree the doubts and the self doubts and the fear, some of that is healthy. I mean, if you're confidence is important too.
Okay.
But I think there's kind of a healthy balance in those. You just got to kind of check yourself. I mean, obviously you can self-doubt yourself and completely give up, and maybe that's not the wrong move either. I mean, if it would be the wrong move if everything that you wanted to do you self-doubted yourself and gave up. But like, not everybody. You might end up somewhere, doing something better. Or something different, that ends up, I don't know, I think about that. I mean, it's just one of those forks in the road, but the fear was real. The struggle is very real.
Now, when in those 10 months, did you make a lot of sacrifices, like less friends, less like fun time, and more just animation and crunching?
You mean after school?
Yeah.
The dark time.
The dark time, dark months.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go there, I mean, I think it was. I mean, because I had a life in Savannah. I had my college friends. Some of them are going to get jobs. Some of them are. A lot of people I knew actually came out here to LA. They came out here with like next to nothing, and they really just scrapped it together. And a lot of them ended up making it in whatever industry they were going for. It's a tough time if you find yourself in that position. Out of school, you don't have anything lined up. For me, I had just put so much time. It's actually when I think it was like over 4.5 years. Because I ended up they're a 3-class per quarter system. So for like the last 2 years, I ended up going 2 classes. Because I was working, going 2 classes, and then I would go to school in the summer to almost make up for not taking the full course schedule for the previous year, and then I also got a minor, so I was there for a while. So I put almost 5 years into this, and I wasn't about to just give up, at least not by then. Maybe I would have eventually, but I was and I was getting to the point where that. The idea of giving up, was becoming stronger. I mean, it was creeping in, like, is this, because that's by then you're thinking, oh, well, I've started, freshman year, and now it's been, almost 6 years, if I don't land anything now, I mean, from day one, when you start your journey of post high school education,
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah. So that stuff is, I think probably anybody who is in the industry today has, probably a similar origin story, some less rough than others, but then you got your prodigies too, because you got people that either skip school altogether. I remember we went to, in Terminal Reality, I mean, there were a couple just prodigies that basically came right out of high school, 18, 19, and they're making video games.
Yeah. And I think the sad part with that is that a lot of people compare themselves to them. So then they're like, oh, I'm not good at him. Like, he's 19, he's doing that. And it's like, no, like, that's just like the anomaly. Like, it's not the normal. Do your thing, work hard, and you'll get to where you need to be. They're just talented.
Yeah,
It happens.
yeah, we all have our own journey, you know.
Yeah.
But it's gonna take hard work either way. You know, even these, you know, even the guys that are doing it at a super young age, and you know, that's because they started really young. And I can tell you that, you know, the couple that I'm thinking of, there were it was like a character artist, environment artist. You know, there was this. They've got to still be around. There's this forum called Polycount.
Okay.
I don't know if they're still around or not, but it was pretty. At least in the circles I was involved in, was pretty popular. And they used to have these, you know, it was a pretty active forum. You had some pros on there, you had some student level, you know, artists, and they would have like competitions and stuff. And these guys ended up getting like discovered through that forum, and literally like hired through that forum. I think there's other examples of that, because used to be, you know, there's some animation competitions and stuff that like people would end up landing jobs out of that. But you know, I guess the takeaway there is that they were out there. They were putting their stuff out there. They were, you know, they were getting involved. They were, you know, in a sense, networking. You know, and staying active and you know, challenging themselves. You know, and in a sense, competing and you know, so that it's not like it was easy, you know, for anybody.
No, I bet not. It's it's a difficult journey. That's why it's a competitive industry. Now, I actually wanted to get back to what you were saying earlier about mentors, and I was wondering who is your animation mentors, and how can someone find their own mentors?
Yeah, so you know, I guess I go back to in school when I actually, you know, there were some pretty good professors, and really like when I think of like who I learned the most from, you know, a couple of them weren't animators. There's you know, there's like a lot of the like kind of concept art related classes, like a lot of like you know, sayings he had. Like there's just certain teachings that, you know, I still kind of think back on now. And that's not, that was, he was just, you know, incredible master level artist. But animation wise, I did have a really really good professor. He was young. He had not, I think he was a grad student, and he turned around and started teaching, but he just happened to, you know, he just had a really good grasp of, you know, all the principles and everything. He just had a real good way of teaching. And so his name was Greg Lemon, and he's still out there. He's working. I mean, I think he only taught for like a couple of years, but and I have other friends too that are animators in the industry that, you know, kind of studied under him. There was there's a guy named Keith Lango, who the older you know, artists, animators might know. I don't know. He's not out there really teaching anymore. I think he's still at Valve. He went to Valve like 8-10 years ago. I think he's still there. I don't know if he's still got content out there, but there were a couple of people out there that just had like, you know, some tutorials, and I actually, you know, some instructional videos. And there's got to be so much content out there now in that regard. I mean, it's just what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, and when I was coming up, it's not like I had, you know, any kind of one-on-one interaction with him. Although I eventually, years later, got some one-on-one training. He had some like, I had some in between jobs basically in 08, 09, and ended up doing some training with him. So, you know, I guess there's two examples. There's, you know, one that I actually got to interact with, you know, face to face on a pretty regular basis, and then the other one's just like, he's just putting a lot of, you know, instructional content out there, you know, engineered towards up and coming animators. So really, I mean, you know, they're both effective. And then, you know, I'm trying to think like now, you know, my mentors are coworkers. You know, I guess you find yourself in a studio with a lot of time people we all kind of challenge each other and inspire each other and motivate each other. So, that's because you never stop learning. It never stops becoming a challenge. And of course, I have the luxury of being surrounded by all these incredibly talented, accomplished artists and animators. But if you're ever coming, I mean, I would think it probably wouldn't take too much effort to find just basically just educational content. I imagine that, like, from what I've seen, the resources say just absolutely swamped when I was coming up.
That's really good because mentors can help a lot. Really can help you see what you don't see for yourself, and it's actually
Yeah.
makes me want to lead into networking, which is like, how did you effectively network when you were coming up?
Well, like I mentioned in the story of how I kind of landed my first gig. I mean, that's one thing, because I've had a lot of contemplation over the years of, like, the necessity of traditional education when it comes to, if you know that your goal is like is being say being a video game animator, for instance. Like, if you knew that that's what you wanted, which as I explained, I didn't necessarily know for sure if that I didn't know for sure that I was going to be a specialist, but that was my end goal. Had I known that, that's I think a luxury. Like, if you've got that determination, because then there's kind of this, the road, kind of which road to take a little bit more. It's less just like exploration. Yeah. So networking. So I guess one of the advantages of being in a traditional, educational atmosphere is you're around a lot of the people in the same boat, and as soon as people are going to make it, I might make it before you do, and absolutely, that was a key factor in my quote unquote success in the early days, because there's that artist that just happened to know who left school early, never graduated. To this day, never graduated. I all I needed was that tip, because I had to put in the work. Obviously, I had to do the test and I had to be impressed and all that stuff. But it wasn't like an advertised position, where I don't know anybody there. So I've got somebody at the studio, and geez, I mean, most of the jobs in the past, there's usually that aspect of it. Like, you or have worked with somebody at the studio, which is helpful. I knew they were looking. I got the test, and ended up getting the gig. You could say that had I not known him, I might not have gotten that particular job, my first job. And you'd probably be right. It just, that was, it just so happened. But that's like, I think, like, one of the biggest advantages to being in the traditional school, or I'd imagine even if you're in this mostly online based educational atmosphere, that you can still network, right? Because there's a forum, there's other students, you're giving each other critiques, thoughts, all that stuff, developing relationships there. You meet other like-minded individuals that are really hardworking, and so once you get out there, that's kind of your initial network. Beyond that, once I had my first gig, now I'm pretty good terms with and friends with this team that we just made a couple games together. These guys all go off to other studios, and even the reason why I ever ended up in LA, I came out here from Texas. I started working at what was then known as EALA, and that was kind of a tip too. That was another college buddy.
Yeah.
So and you've got to get the job yourself. But I mean, just that little seed that little like that connection, it does seem pretty key, although it's not like you couldn't, get gigs not knowing anybody, sending, if you've got like a decent reel to show them, and most HR departments are at least giving a glance over most of the applicants, and depending on their needs and all that stuff, whether, usually, the budget and stuff like it, they're going to try and have somewhat of a balanced approach to skill, experience level, with the teams that they're building, some studios are going for only super experience, and some, due to budget concerns and stuff like that, which is what, like, the first studio I started at, we were mostly, inexperienced, like very little experience to no experience. They were trying to get the best and cheapest talent they could. Where do you go? You start scouting around the schools and talking to their friends. I mean, that was literally how they had built the team, the first team that I was a part of, and they did a great job, because, there's a lot of really talented, hardworking people who are a part of that team that are off, at all the top studios around the country today. So, and today it's generally, what it seems to be the case with, like, the hiring processes, right? So yeah, I mean, networking is important. It continues to be, throughout my career.
So the important thing though is, like, even though you get like those friends who give you tips, it's still, you need to go through the interview process, right? Like the like, tests and stuff. So how do you prepare for that? Is it because I'm pretty sure it's not an easy thing to do unless you're, ready for it.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess. Well, real quick. I mean, there's that old saying. It's like not what you know, it's who you know. I think, I think that's a little disingenuous. I mean, especially, it might be that way in some industries, but I think in ours, there's an aspect of that, but what you know is extremely important. So how do you go about? I guess you're asking, like, how did I go about that first interview?
Yeah, well, like, how did you prepare for that? What was it like?
Yeah, so I'm trying to, this is a long time ago now.
You're good.
I think I had the benefit of, and this is pretty common practice in the video game industry, are these tests that they send out, because you can have, this great reel, but a lot of times, there's a specific, skill set, aesthetic that they want to nail. And so maybe your reel is good, but it doesn't necessarily show them exactly what they want to see. So, rarely these days are, animators, and at least in most of the studios I know of, just hired based entirely off their reel. It can happen, but and there's some debate as the pros and cons of this approach, but so I had the benefit of, they really liked my test. And so, my memory is, at least for my first gig, it's kind of like the work spoke for itself. I think it was like a minimal phone screen. There really wasn't much of an interview process, believe it or not. And yeah, I mean, because, I think, again, it was, they, maybe a more, higher budget studio would have flown me out and interviewed me and gone through all these people, but they're like, they're counting their pennies over there, and they're like, well, we'll take a chance with this kid, but it's, but it was all, that would have also, it also helped that, that they respected, my connection in there, and so he could vouch for me. And yeah, I just remember talking to the art director, like, briefly, and I don't remember any details about that. I remember it like they really liked my test. Wanted to see if if I was open to doing it, to moving halfway across the country and working on this game, I was, that was unquestionably open to doing that, and it just happened. It happened quick.
What was that like, just moving across country?
Oh, that's
Scary,
really
exciting.
I mean, that was definitely one of the most exciting, days of my life. I mean, I think I jumped, 6 feet in the air and screaming the whole thing, because
Like,
that's
we're out
all.
of the dark months.
Yeah. I mean, that's all I wanted. That's all you want. That's why you put in all that time and the years, and that's the dream. I mean, really, going back into being, that young teen at pre-college programs, and it was literally a dream come true. I mean, that was definitely like, yeah, I'll never forget that.
So,
and
from when you started to when you got that like job, how many years was that? Was that 6, 7 years?
Well, I mean, when I say started, I was just saying like freshman in college,
Yeah.
So I mean, freshman in college to land in the first gig would be about 5.5 years.
Okay. But yeah, see, that puts it in perspective, because a lot of people are like, after 2 years, they're like, oh, I'm not good enough yet. Like, it takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the caveat there, is that, I wasn't even in any stretch of the imagination like animating the whole time, or, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it must be pretty frustrating if you got, dove into Maya. You're like, that you want to be, video game animator, and you're focused solely on that. You spend all your time on that. Your kind of hours that you're putting into that, after a couple of years, could be somewhat the equivalent, give or take, of probably the amount of, time of actual animation time that I had in that. But there's just a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. There is. I feel like a lot of it too is just focus. I think a lot of people think they're working a long time on what they're doing, but really they're split and doing so many different things. So when they say, "Oh, I've been doing it for 2 years," it's like, have you really been doing it for 2 years? Like, you're judging yourself too hard, because you've also been taking care of other things. So it's just like, take your time, patience, you'll get there.
Yeah.
Not everybody has
it's impossible to
time.
just only animate.
Yeah. Like 14-hour days. I mean, if you can, it's great, because you'll probably then get good in like a year, but not everybody can do that. Yeah.
It definitely takes time. Geez, I mean, who knows how many thousands of hours I've spent animating now, and it's like, and I've become such a specialist that like there's even certain things now I feel like kind of a noob, like when you only do like, violent action all the time, year after year. I might be at like, a student level if I were to sit down and try and animate a Pixar scene right now, and try and have all the like squats and stretch and, hitting the poses and like, all that stuff. Cause it's so stylistically different than like the universe I've been living in for, so many years.
It's also another great point you make about specializing. Like, you can, even in animation, there's so many different styles, different types of animation. So even though you're like, oh, I'm trying to be a master, you might think of animation, I need to be mastered all of it. And again, it also slows you down, it burns you out. When it's like, maybe you just need to be good at melee animation, combat animation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty common, thing in video games, right? I mean, there's a lot of like, I mean, let's face it, it's like the premise behind a lot of AAA titles. There's going to be some type of, combat going on. But you get to kind of showcase a lot of the principles of animation with that stuff too. I mean, you got to have like a good grasp of physics, but especially if you're going for, something that's like, we use the term grounded a lot. It's like it's not necessarily reality, but feels more, grounded in realistic physics than, say like a Kung Fu Panda or something like that.
Great movie. It's got a lot of important themes to that movie that like I watch it and I'll be like, wow, that's deep for a kids movie.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, animation's fantastic too.
Mm-hmm. For instance, when you watch movies like that or any other movies, do you get inspiration from that? And you're like, I want to make that on your own to practice?
Yeah, well, yeah, I might have those thoughts. I haven't really done any personal products in a while. It's something that's been on my mind because, as you're speaking to me, the reason why I even have time right now is I'm on paternity leave. I've just had another boy, 6
Oh,
weeks old now.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So in a sense have free time, in a sense have no time at all.
I know how it feels.
I haven't animated in a little bit, so I'm getting a little, itchy about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll get down and try and do a little personal something. Another thing too is the reality of video game animation. And at most, I mean, depending on what you're working on, obviously, but a lot of it's work with motion capture. So I guess that's something. If you're trying to follow in my footsteps and you want to do the type of stuff I've done over the past bunch of years, then that's not something to kind of brush over, because it's a huge part of the content that we create. So we do stuff, we do hand key things, we do create things out of nothing for things that you can't do in real life. Or a lot of times we do, prototypes, like things running, and so you have to kind of create it by hand. But we do, I've done, mostly some form of, working with motion capture over the course of the last 10 years.
And that's something you had to learn on the job. Like
yeah.
Is that difficult to learn?
No. Yeah. No, and that's why, usually people don't want to see studios or, anyone who's involved in hiring animators. They want to see what people are capable of on their own without because if you're a good animator, motion capture is just going to be this like icing on the cake. It's just going to enable you to create a lot more in a shorter amount of time, and do it in a way that it's gonna have an aesthetic, and in a sense it's a style. I mean, there's just certain things that the human body does that I think all the training in the world, if you're just creating it, it's just not, you're going to end up with different results. There's little nuances, there's little, just things that happen in real life that it's very difficult to kind of just recreate in a vacuum. And just by the nature of, my timeline, when I got involved and, where I am now, yeah, I ended up learning on the job in a sense. When I first got started, they had some motion capture to work with. It was so bad that I didn't use it. I would use it as, and when I say bad, I mean, it was just like there were a lot of artifacts, the cameras in, I don't know, it was just really jittery. It was like, you could spend a ton of time, trying to clean this thing up. Or what I did was use it as basically reference video. It was like 3D reference video.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in my first couple of games, that we didn't actually use. I didn't use any of the motion capture. It was maybe a couple days worth of shoots, whereas now, it's like some countless amount of days worth of shoots.
Yeah.
Stuff we do. But nowadays, of course, everything's super solid, more than usable.
Nice. So now let's get into Naughty Dog. So how did you get started with that? Did you apply to it, or did you get like a tip, or how's your journey start there?
Yeah, so yeah, it was very similar to first job, really. I mean, so when I moved to LA, I was working at Yale LA, like I said, and it was there was this like financial collapse and stuff that happened. They I was working on this project called Tiberium that it was a Command and Conquer. It was going to be a Command and Conquer first-person shooter RTS hybrid, and it was this really ambitious project. And and I worked on it for a couple of years, and it ended up, things kind of went south, and they ended up canning it. And so here I find myself like, all right, I'm in LA. I've got 5 years of experience. Shipped a couple games, had one get canceled. Who's here? Who's doing stuff? And so I knew an effects artist at Naughty Dog. So here's an example of networking. So I applied, and I remember it wasn't so much a tip as I think it was, by that time, there's posts online of, places like Naughty Dog are looking. And so I applied like anyone would do. But I did have somebody on the inside. And I'll tell you how that helped me, is that, I think like HR had there was some point where there was one point where he had reminded HR to look at my stuff, where it was like, it maybe got lost in the mess or whatever. But I don't actually, to this day, I don't really know the behind the scenes before I got there, because I did a test. And the test then was pretty demanding. I spent a fair amount of time on it, and I took it really seriously. And I wanted it to be my best work at the time. And I sent it in, and didn't hear anything back. I think what I heard is that later they suddenly didn't have the need or something. It was they thought they had a couple spots open, and then they weren't sure about it. So it was it took a couple months, 2 or 3 months. But I remember at first, they basically just denied my application, or just I think I don't know if I got an email or a call, but it was hey, thanks, but no thanks. And
how'd you deal with that?
How did I deal with that? Oh, it was a huge letdown. Anytime this is kind of the debate that video game, animators a little bit might get into about the test situation, because, if you have a number of applicants and, you got to, in order for you to do something that's, you want to impress whoever's looking at it, and you want to do your best stuff. So you're going to put a ton of time and effort and, stress and all this stuff. Because, that may or may not be biased towards people who have the time and means to put into those tests. So if you think about you got a full-time job, you're not so happy there or whatever, you're trying to get a job somewhere else, you have a test. Maybe you got a family, you got how much time you have to put into this test that might take you, however many hours. And I think, I put in more time than I was probably supposed to, because they do say, there's a limit. But I was like, this is Naughty Dog. I'm gonna show them I'm not gonna show them anything.
Yeah.
The best that I can do. So, I mean, the nice thing about that is you got work that, if you did a good, because I ended up, there's tests I've taken, jobs that I didn't get that, hey, I did a decent little piece here. I can, show it to somebody else and try have it be part of my reel. And so that's kind of how I ended up looking at that then. But I mean, anytime you're really going for something like that and you don't get it, it's a huge disappointment. So, I was obviously delighted, 2-3 months later, I think it was, when I got the call and they reconsidered. That was for Uncharted 2.
Mm-hmm.
But
so after you get the call back, is the process pretty easy then? You just go in and they interview you as a person? Because I'm not sure how that interview process works.
I think that was a phone interview too. Okay. Strangely enough, because I was in LA and they're in LA. I don't even think I don't think I went in. Yeah, depending, it was contract, so it's something. It's kind of become more of a thing now because the needs of of the projects nowadays are just so great that it's kind of like how movies were then and probably still are now. Is that you just get to a certain point in production, you need a lot of people for a short period of time. So the only way to really manage that is you get basically some a contingent workforce. People that you can't commit to 50 new staff because there's just not really going to be anything for them to do after you wrap on the project. So and Naughty Dog I think had been doing that a little bit for a while, and for them it's it was like basically like a 6-month contract at that time. So I think I don't know. I mean, I think if it were, it was generally it was pretty painless. It actually before I came in, they had a real hit the ground running approach. I mean, nowadays we've got like this huge tutorial system because there's so many custom tools and stuff. I mean, if you looked at our Maya, almost wouldn't recognize it. It's very, very customized with tools and stuff. Doesn't really resemble too closely to what Maya out of the box. So there's a lot to learn. But I think, when I started, it was only 80 people or so, 80, 90 people. And, animation team was relatively small, so it was, a little bit more one-on-one. But I was working on shots, day one. I mean, I think came in that morning, I had like a little crash course, and I was working on something that afternoon.
Dang,
yeah, it's pretty quick. I think now we give people, a couple, 2-3 days to settle in and digest all the, tutorials and stuff that we have, but yeah, I don't know, the needs of the project, I kind of came in like, 6 months before ship. Uncharted 2, it was really well underway, just a lot of animation needed to be done, and so, they didn't want to waste any time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that must have been exciting working at Naughty Dog.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was super stoked. I mean, still am. But, yeah, that's a big one. And like I said, that's one of those places even in Savannah, I was well aware of and looked up to, from an animation standpoint, and then I got in, I saw Uncharted 2 was which ended up being great and, pretty groundbreaking at the time. And, so just to be a part of that was super exciting.
Yeah, it shows that like all those years you put in is worth it in the end. 'Cause you got the job.
So.
Yeah. And then so like what was a typical day for an animator like, without going into like too detailed, but like was it would you like just go in there and start working at it, and then like what was it like?
Oh, it's it's changed over the years. I mean, I can say like, when I first got started at Naughty Dog, we kind of have like, there's different aspects of animation in our games, right? Like, because it's kind of we're very story based.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of animation that happens that kind of helps the flow as you're moving through spaces. You kind of see a lot of things that are one-off. They might be, I mean, they're, we use the term in-game cinematic. So, runs, it's not really so accurate anymore because even the cinematics are real time now. But back then, they weren't real time. Like PS3, we weren't doing real time cinematics. So it was like, you could kind of break it down to like real time or the pre-rendered cinematics, in-game cinematics, so basically real-time cinematics, and then then gameplay, which is like all of the like systemic, everything that happens on the stick and the buttons, that would happen systemically, but the IDCs, typically will happen once in a playthrough, and so because there's so much of that, you basically have like a small team at that time, now a large team dedicated to that stuff. So like the workflow when you're working on that stuff is probably a little bit more analogous to, say, like making a show or movie. I'd imagine it in that like you can kind of look at things almost from like a shot perspective. You're basically like you're getting from point A to B. This and that has to happen. There's some mocap to work with, or not, and that's that. And it's like that. When you're in that position, usually, for me at that time, new doing IDCs, a lot of times it's set up somebody else. And, there's the characters in the scene. It's running in the game. They get from point A to point B. It could be anything from like stick figures like floating across the environment to some base level animation, to some stand-in stuff to work with. Of course, now ever since Uncharted 2, I've been on the systemic gameplay side mostly, and the approach there is quite a bit different. So yeah, it's kind of tough to describe a typical day because, like, Jesus is thinking like, what is a typical? Is there such a thing as a typical day? I mean, sometimes there's meetings. Sometimes we've got to shoot. Sometimes it's there's days that are just preparing for the shoot, writing shot lists. Figuring out the needs of any system that we're going for. What do we have to work with? Going into that, do we have anything at all? Or it can vary quite a bit.
Okay.
And then you got your days that they're quiet, that you've got a lot of stuff to get through, and it's more about focusing on the assets themselves and polishing stuff and making it look pretty, and those are nice days. And then when the days are longer, you can have all the above. So it's tough to describe a typical day.
No, that was good then.
Yeah.
It just shows that also you have to be very flexible, adaptive to what's going on
Yeah,
that
it depends
day.
on the needs, where you're at, in the project, where you're at with whatever things you happen to be focusing on at the time. There's a lot of testing, a lot of going over things with the director, implementing that feedback, a little bit of testing. Not as much playing the game as probably should. I always look back and think, oh, I wish I would have, like had more. That's just like you can't. There's always more to do than you really can do, and so fitting. That's a tough thing I think for all of us to try and fit in, is to actually like sit there and like experience it from the player side, like from a pure player experience. Like really giving yourself time to, play. But we do it, I do it here and there, and you really can't do that until it's close to finished anyway. It's kind of crazy every time because, you don't really get to see what it is that everybody's doing and what we're all working for until very near the end. When everything really starts to come together and all the story bits and everything, just you can digest it in a way that it all makes sense.
It's Naughty Dog for you, right? Now, for animators and even people who like play the game, how complicated is it for, let's say, when you dodge an attack in the game to like animate that, to work on that? Like, how long does it take to polish something like that?
Mm. So that's that's something that I developed. And that's something that we added this time, right? Because you couldn't dodge in the last one.
Yeah, no.
How difficult is that? Well, so in The Last of Us 2, that dodge system, we will refer to it as a contextual dodge system
Okay.
because there's a pool of animations that, and there's quite a few of them, that will play relative to the type of attack that you're dodging. So if you're being attacked, say, by a human NPC, and they have a hammer, and they're swinging like this, like diagonal. You have different swings. It's all it's all kind of based off of like attack direction and angle, essentially, because they have there's like combinations of swings. It really, you can break down their swings to like basically just that. It's an attack direction angle off of where they are on their swing, and you dodge. If you dodge to the left, well, from your perspective, you're gonna dodge to your left. There's like a handful of animations that can play that are authored to this specific attack direction and type. So she'll that's why, like, you might know, I don't know, maybe you did, but she'll actually like duck under and off to the left. If you push right and you dodge, then she's gonna like be dodging this specific attack in a way that like should look right and make sense. So that was actually kind of a fun system to develop because it felt pretty good to have that on the stick working. Because there's those ones like, if they're swiping horizontally, and you can duck under, or you just back off, coming straight down, and of course, like most dodge systems, I mean, it's timing based. I mean, you can do it too early and too late, but there's a little bit of pretty witty little scripting in there that plays with the playback timing, so that like it feels like it's all happening at the right time. Because even if you do it early enough to where it's valid, you'll dodge the swing, but it could look like she's dodging too early, and it won't look right. So it'll actually like play a little bit with the playback speed of the NPC and player animation to make those happen a little closer together. So like by the time you hit the button, the end result's gonna be the same, but it's just gonna play a little bit with the playback, so that this all like looks right. Because before we did that, there's a wide enough range of time that it's valid to to have like a successful dodge, that you can do it a little bit too early and too late. And if we just played it back at the speed it was authored at, that you might get some clipping, or just it doesn't really feel right. So that's basically like, it's kind of simple, really, like that system, but there's quite a few animations, because it's you have all the different combinations of like, well, are they attacking this way, and then which way am I pushing on the stick when I'm dodging. So like you can range, I don't know how many different combinations I would end up with, but there's quite a few. And that was got a lot of dodging on the stage. Just that was actually kind of a tough one to like make look right. But at least with the contextual dodges, you at least have that like feedback of being attacked. I actually found the open dodges to be, we call them open dodges. They're like not basically just dodging, but like outside of this valid range of being attacked. So like if you did it too early, you did it too late, or you do it when there's no one else around at all, getting that to feel right was a little bit more difficult.
Well, that's really cool. And then for those dodges, you like set it up where they do motion capture? You're like, hey, this is how you need to dodge? Or does someone else do that? Okay, cool.
No, yeah, I did all that.
So then how do you kind of just like hit, like swing at them and then they do the dodge, or you've like researched it? How does that work?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're basically. I mean, it's acting. It's all pretending. So did we have? Yes, we had. So I have generally whenever I go to the stage, I've got two stunt actors, and for that particular shoot, we did have somebody swinging at the actor who played Ellie for most of our action stuff. We had a few female stunt actors we worked with, one primarily who did most of those. And yeah, so that we literally, like how you see it in the game, I mean, that's what we're doing in real life on the stage.
That's really cool. Yeah.
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 We just have to, you get that stuff. That's generally how like everything's done. We try and if it looks like it can be done in real life, then that means that we likely did do it in real life, and then we just had to work with it from there. Because like you got to work with the timing and the all the nuances. You still have to polish it and maybe you got to make her duck lower or further off to the left to really get out of the way of things and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But the foundation of it all are real life people doing that stuff.
That's really cool, and it makes it feel way more realistic, fluid. The combat was so good. Everything felt
I'm glad
really
you
to
liked
it.
it. Yeah, that's what we're going for.
Mhm. Especially the fighting scene, like the combat scenes. Ooh. The different type of attacks, the hammer or the machete or any of the weapons, always just felt satisfying.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's it's kind of an aesthetic that we went forward with the first game and tried to continue on with this one.
Yeah, well, awesome job. Yeah. What we like to do at the end is a challenge for the GameDev.tv students. So if you want to give them a challenge, it could be anything.
Do you think it should be targeted towards like animators, like people who want to?
Yeah, that's fine. That's what I prefer. But like, it could be anything. Anything you think of, anything you want it to be.
I mean, the first thing to come to mind would be, my advice to anyone who wants to get into, video game animation, which would be, why wait for somebody to give you a test? Like, well, I'll tell you, somebody who's taken a lot of tests with, a lot of studios people have heard of. There's a common theme, and that would be do some fight choreography. Take a couple characters, give one of them a nice big heavy weapon, and the other one a lighter weapon, and then let's say the one with the bigger weapon is AKA the bad guy, the enemy, and he or she or it or whatever whatever character rig you can get out there, takes a big swing. The reason why I say big weapon is because you'd be able to show all the weight and stuff, but go for some big swings. Have the defender dodge out of the way, do a little counter action, and if you're up for it, the ultraviolence, a finishing move. Because that it's that kind of direction that you're gonna get from a studio with the test. And if you've got something solid on your reel that shows stuff like that, that's gonna get you a job, most likely. Somewhere.
Yeah, it's like being proactive, preparing for it before it even happens.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be super long. We all know, a second of animation time is like eternity sometimes, and so it doesn't have to be super long and epic. 10 seconds maybe. Even that would be on the longer side.
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, 5. I think it's a great challenge because it just prepares people for possible job interviews and just prepares people to be more confident. Because I feel like once you know that you've done like different tests and you're like, oh no, you can throw anything at me and I got this, you're more confident. Confident interviews, confident in your abilities. You have less of that imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And if you've already got your reel, then it's like, oh, we see that you can do this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, that's it's a specific maybe style of games, and not everybody might be into that, but it's pretty prevalent in the industry. And that's somebody, I've looked at a lot of reels. I've hired animators. I've looked at a lot of candidates. It's still surprising to me how many people will apply, say, for a job at Naughty Dog and don't necessarily have stuff on their reel that's like applicable to the type of content that we're known to create. So like, especially if you know that you're going like, I want to be in this studio, if you can create something that looks analogous to the like stuff that they've done in the past, and it looks like something that like one of their people would do, I mean that's gonna mean a lot. You're gonna like you're gonna get noticed because not everybody has that stuff, and it seems like pretty obvious, but yeah, I still see a lot of reels that just like don't have like that type of stuff, and of course that's what I'm looking for personally, and not everybody's looking for that, but that's just that's my perspective on it.
Okay, no, that's a good perspective. It's gonna help a lot of people out. And but thanks for coming on. This was great. It's a lot of stuff for animators to take in, for anybody to really like learn about how to, it's not easy at first, but keep pushing, keep going. And awesome job with the game, and just everything was great. And
thank
we
you.
liked.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Of course, anytime. And we're also gonna hand the mic to you to end it off. If you want to do any shout outs, any inspiration, any quotes to just end it off. And thanks for coming on.
Oh geez, well I'll just give a shout out to all the dogs. We just we all really put everything we had in this last one. So I know a lot of people I hope people appreciate that when they play it, and there's humans behind all that stuff that made it for you guys. So yeah, shout out to the dogs.
Well, that's it. Thanks for listening. You can find all GameDev.tv courses at courses.gamedev.tv/courses or in the show notes with a 10% discount. Get started with your game development journey today.